The president admits there is more work to do to rein in the rising prices that have hit Americans so hard in the last year. But economists say they remain concerned as signs in the U.S. and abroad point to continued struggles on inflation. Joining us here in Washington is White House economic advisor Jared Bernstein. Great to have you back on Fox News Sunday.
Great to be back with you, Shannon.
Okay, so new numbers this week, as we discussed back in July, they're still at 40-year highs. Market Watch puts it this way. They say, do not be fooled by falling gas prices. Inflation has spread far and wide through the U.S. economy. They say groceries, rent, home furnishings, medical care, new cars, auto insurance, education, all of those things surged in August. So what now?
Well, first of all, this is why easing inflationary pressures is the president's #1 top domestic priority. And on gas prices, in fact, they didn't surge. At least they didn't surge up. In fact, they've been falling. They've been falling for 96 days in a row. So we're not talking about a blip. We're talking about a durable trend there, down $1.36 per gallon. For the average driver, that's about $70 of savings per month. And if you aggregate that across all of the drivers in the country, it's coming close to $500 million per day. So that's a real bit of breathing room. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act is very much in the mix now, and that's going to help reduce costs of prescription drugs, of health care, of energy. Very important to get that implemented. But yes, prices remain uncomfortably high. That's why it's the top priority. That's why we're doing everything we can, whether it's a release of oil from the strategic reserves that the president oversaw to help on gas, whether it's our work in the ports, whether it's ocean shipping costs, a bill the president signed to help bring those costs down 60%. We've got a lot more work to do. You said it correctly, but we are very much devoted to that cause.
Let's talk about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, because Forbes says this. It was a big part of bringing down cost of the gasoline. It says, of course, if for some reason we had a true supply emergency and found ourselves needing that oil, it would be looked upon as a terrible decision that we're at a multi-decade low on what's available there. Energy Department spokeswoman says it's not likely we're going to replenish it until likely after fiscal year 2023. Are we putting ourselves in a precarious situation?
I don't think so. I mean, I think this is actually one of the real success stories against that part of inflation, gas prices. So when they peaked out at over $5 a gallon, the president oversaw a release of a historical number of barrels, 180 million from the strategic reserves, got our allies to release another 60 million, so 240 million barrels. That move definitely has its fingerprints on this $1.30, what did I say?
30 cents, yeah.
Actually $1.34, $1.34 decline since the peak in June, providing some much needed breathing room to families. But look, we have a lot more work to do. And here, I think the Inflation Reduction Act is so important, not just what I said to you a minute ago about reducing costs in health care and prescription drugs and energy costs, but really thinking about the other side. In this case, the Republicans have said that their top economic priority is repealing the Inflation Reduction Act. That is precisely the same thing as saying our top economic priority is raising the cost of health care, raising the cost of insulin to seniors, raising the cost of prescription drugs, raising the cost of energy, and that pushes in exactly the wrong direction.
Okay. The CBO has said, though, that it's negligible, the impact of potentially of the Inflation Reduction Act, and that what has been done with student loan forgiveness essentially wipes out any benefits.
Yeah, no, I think that the point there is to get under the hood and look what's in the Inflation Reduction Act in this regard. And I think there's two parts of it. The first is that when you cap out-of-pocket expenditures for people, seniors with serious expensive illnesses like cancers or Alzheimer's, diabetes, you're talking about saving someone who's now spending $8,000, $10,000 a year, $6,000 or $8,000 a year, because it's capped at $2,000. When you're talking about finally doing something that both parties have fought for decades and have failed to get across the legislative goal line, which is allowing Medicare to negotiate for lower drug costs, that is a true victory for American seniors in particular, and the cost of insulin for seniors. And the president wants to extend that to kids. Republicans have blocked him. So our plan is to implement these very much in the spirit of helping households deal with these price pressures.
Those are important because those are critical cases. All of us would be cheering for people to have a better situation there. But let's talk about our polling numbers. Has inflation caused you financial hardship over the last 6 months? 78% of Americans say yes. That is up 3% from the last time that you were here. People feel like things are getting worse for them. They blame the president. 65% disapprove of how he's doing on inflation. And even Cardi B is weighing in. She is a big supporter of Democrats and progressive policies. She's frustrated. Here's what she had to say this week.
I was looking at some areas, the way that the prices soar up. Like, how are people surviving? I want to know. Like my family and my friends, they're so grateful to have me. But it's just like, yo, what happened to people that don't have a me? All these promises are being made, but living is unbearable.
She doesn't think the promises are being kept. So what do you say to people who don't have a Cardi B in their lives?
Well, I think that when it comes to promises made, promises kept, this president and this White House really have a very strong track record. And when it comes to the polling that you mentioned, I think you have to there also get under the hood. I was reading the very article on foxnews.com this morning that reported on that poll. It had the following sentence: there are some small but clear improvements in Biden's ratings. Now, small but clear. And I think that very much stems from some of the things we've been talking about already, Shannon. The fact that over the past 2 months, inflation has been effectively flat. Now, I'm talking about July and August.
But still at 40-year high.
Exactly. So just in those 2 months, we've had flat prices. But over the year, inflation continues to be uncomfortably high. And that's why we are trying to implement all the plans that we've talked about. But, when you think about investing in the future, empowering workers, building it here in America, providing American households with some breathing room, building more resilient supply chains, rewarding work, not wealth through our tax code. Those are not parts of an imaginary blueprint. Those are parts of a blueprint that is actively in play. This is legislation that has somehow, by this president and this Congress, been moved. I'm talking, of course, about Inflation Reduction Act, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS Act, standing up a domestic semiconductor industry, standing up a domestic electric vehicle industry, reducing costs of prescription drugs, of healthcare, of energy. All of those would be on the chopping block if Democrats are not able to continue to implement those plans. And speaking to Cardi B and anyone else who's experiencing these pressures, which we know are real, these plans are in play and they are working.
Okay, so let's talk about future. We know consumers are frustrated. They are feeling the pain of this. So let's look forward, because it looks like employers are worried as well. These are some of the headlines on looking at employer freezes, hiring, all these things. The Business Insider on Friday talks about the FedEx boss warning of a worldwide recession, closing stores, freezing hiring, trimming hours, parking planes. Financial Times, Goldman Sachs plans to cut jobs because they say deal making is drying up. Amazon shrinks workforce by 100,000, hiring freezes, layoffs above the law, says hiring freezes, stealth layoffs hit top 50 big law firms.
Yeah.
So what are they seeing that the White House doesn't, or are you guys just not willing to acknowledge it?
No, first of all, we're very willing to acknowledge we're very much a fact-based economics team when it comes to all of this. But I have to give you facts on the other side of that coin, okay? Since this president got here, almost 10 million jobs created, an historical record, an unemployment rate close to a 50-year low, 3.7%. There are 18 states out there with unemployment at 3% or below. These are historical numbers. It's about the tightest labor market on record. Now, at the same time, we've been talking about inflationary pressures. We know that the Federal Reserve is in a hiking cycle to try to dampen those inflationary pressures, as they should be. We know that's cooling off an overheated housing market. So these are all dynamics that are in play. But in the background is one of the strongest labor markets Americans have ever experienced. And that is such a critical tailwind, given all the other pressures you've just taken us through. And both are true. You have to keep both things in your head at the same time. There are challenges in this economy, and you have an administration with a president overseeing an economic team that is undertaking these challenges with a rigor that I, as a guy who's got aging gray hair over here, I've never seen such an aggressive pushback on these kinds of economic challenges. With
wages being outpaced by inflation, prices up, the cost of borrowing money up, Fed rate again this week. Folks are cheering for you at the White House to get this right.
Thank you. It's nice to hear, Shannon.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.